right, well, welcome listeners and watchers alike to Does the Shoe Fit? Today we have Haleigh here.
Hi.
And we are going to be talking about romance novels, so our own little, book talk.
For sure.
But on a podcast. Specifically looking at Colleen Hoover, but also other similar authors and genres like that.
Absolutely.
So, let's see, we'll go through it. Let's see if the shoe fits. Does this fit reality?
Yum.
Haleigh, start us off.
All right. I think, I myself am a big Colleen Hoover fan, and she has such a boom in popularity with, I think especially in TikTok, and that's kind of what drew me to her. And she has those books where it's like, okay, I can finish it in a day, but
they're
yeah, very easily. But they all are kind of similar but different. It's as same with all romance books, same can be said about Nicholas Sparks or anything like that. And I think what stood out to me was just how unrealistic it makes.
We're just going right off the bat saying unrealistic.
Not start throwing anything under the bus. But it just relationships, and especially the guys in these books, especially where it's this picture perfect
washboard abs.
Yeah,
coming out of the ocean.
Right.
Hair.
It's you
the sun
see him, and it's everyone else goes away, and it's just him, and I'm no, that's not what happened.
That's not what happened to me. How rude.
Right. I want some beautiful surfer boy to come out of the ocean and be you're the most beautiful woman I've ever seen.
Save you from a shark.
Right. And that just doesn't happen.
No
guy just comes up to you. I mean, maybe they do. If you are, you're very lucky. And are just you're the most beautiful woman I've ever seen. We're going to get married.
And talk about how that can be creepy sometimes.
Right.
In the books, it's this hot guy.
Yeah.
And I mean, we could get into this with in real life too, hot guys versus if
For
they're
sure.
not so hot, how that's creepy versus it's okay, which is
Yeah.
totally not okay.
Absolutely.
But the same goes for the books, right? They're always this picture perfect. They're never just
kind of
normal people.
Right. Yes. And I think, granted, have I had guys come up to me before and been oh, you're so hot, can I get your number? It happens, but like you said, I think that's a really good point of okay, are they attractive, or am I oh, I'm not attracted to you, so I'm more creeped out.
And then it's weird.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, versus my gym crush or something coming up to me and being what's going on? You good? I'll be oh my gosh, swooning, versus the other guy who's just as nice and being
yep,
how's it going? I'm gonna be please just go away from me. And that's so wrong, but I think that's how those books are
that's how they get you.
Yeah.
And to be fair, and when you're reading a book, you're trying to escape
Yeah.
from reality, and so I understand that, if you're reading a book, you want to read about the hot guy that, sweeps you off your feet and it's unrealistic. However, what that does to your reality could potentially be harmful.
I agree.
You look at your husband or boyfriend or fiance next to you, and you're ooh, you don't look like that.
Yeah, it's you can start comparing your meet story to their meet story, or little surprises. That's been also a big theme in those books of just showing up randomly at your apartment or where you work with flowers, or surprise dinner reservations, and that's not always realistic. And so I think when you're reading these books, especially Colleen Hoover books, where I'm oh my gosh, I can't get enough of it, and I'm oh, why doesn't my boyfriend do that, or why doesn't my partner do that? I think it can be really unhealthy to have those expectations.
Right. And it's also whether you're single and not in a relationship, and it sets you up to expect your partner to do those things.
For sure.
Oh, well, why if you start dating someone and they're not sending you flowers or cute romantic letters,
means they don't love me.
Right. Now it's well, they don't love me they do in the books. And so there's that aspect of it, and there's also the people who are in a relationship, and then it changes their view of their own relationship because those expectations may not match.
And I think too, especially with expectations, none of these books ever talk about, like, that comfortable phase of a relationship.
Oh, yeah.
Because over time...
The normal phase.
Yeah. After a few months, like, the honeymoon phase passes, and, you know, no more, like, love bombing all the time, or, like, the chase is kind of done.
Yep.
And, like, while the chase is exciting, it's like, okay, you're not in a relationship for the chase, you're in a relationship for that person.
Right.
And all of those books, like, just fail to acknowledge, like...
Yeah.
Over time, it's like, you get into a routine with that person, and no more, like, spontaneous dates, or maybe, like, flowers as often.
For sure.
And so I think then people can be like, oh, well, my love life isn't, like, as exciting as it once was, and that doesn't mean it's a bad thing, it just means that it's changed, and I think that's become something to look at.
Oh, for sure. I mean, I have a couple clients who come to me being like, the spark is gone. And I was like, well, what was your expectations of the spark?
Yeah.
It's not meant to last 10 years. Like, it does change. You get comfortable. It's more of like a routine, mundane, but that is life. And the books don't show that. They show the high intensity, and I mean, a lot of romance things, but specifically talking about Colleen Hoover and books and romance and stuff, I mean, they do that too. Like, it's a spark for years. There's always that, like, I think a lot of times now, I think Colleen Hoover, most of her main characters are girls, correct?
Yes. I have yet to read a book of hers where the main character is a guy. I don't think I've ever read a romance novel where the main character is a guy. Now that I think about it. But I'm thinking of, like, you know, the guys are, you know, focal points of the book, of course, but you never get the guy's perspective. Except for, and I know this is, like, kind of like the opposite of Colleen Hoover. Well, not really. It's still romance. But I know Stephanie Meyers with Twilight, she released...
the Edward version.
Yeah, but it didn't do as well.
Right.
And, like, I never read it.
Yeah. No one wants Edward's version.
And so, I think...
and it's not as, I'm assuming, now I never read the Edward version either, but I have read romance. I'm just going to go out, and I forgot to mention this. I actually haven't really read Colleen Hoover. But I've read other romantic books that are, not necessarily like that kind of romance, but like fantasy romance that have that, which, again, those are wild, and we'll get into some of those, but like,
for sure.
What was I saying? The point of views that I've read are always mostly female, and if they do have a male point of view, it's not nearly as intense as what they show, like, the women feeling. And I think that can get into women's heads. Like, even me reading it, knowing very well, Taylor, this is not real, it gets in my head sometimes too. I'm like, wait, but, like, I don't feel this, like, burning, yearning, stomach lurching, like,
because it's just not normal.
And I'm like, wait, do I actually love him?
Right, and I think this is also something that just kind of popped in my head too, like, especially in, I don't want to get the titles mixed up, but it ends with us, because Colleen Hoover just released, I think it starts with us. But anyway,
I think It Ends With Us was the first one.
I think so. I'm
not
mixing that up. But you're always hearing about, like, what the guy is doing for the girl. Like, in that one.
One-sided.
Yes, and in that book she has, like, 2 love interests, and so it's always being like, oh, well, Ryle did this, or the other guy did that, and it's like, how are you reeling these guys in? Like, what is your, not to sound, like, harsh, but, like, what's the appeal?
What's your contribution to the relationship, even? Like, a relationship goes both ways.
Right.
And I think also this gives women I don't have to do anything. Like, the guy should be sweeping me off my feet. And that's not necessarily the case.
No.
It goes both ways. A relationship should be 2 partners working together. On whatever it is.
Like, taking turns playing date night, or, you know,
like, girls can do these things too, but that's never... that's not the fantasy.
No girl wants to hear about, like, another girl putting in all the effort. It's like, okay, well, I feel like we already do that sometimes. So it's like, why do I want to read about that?
And and that goes back to, like, you know, these books are escape, so there's going to be a level of fantasy and unrealistic expectations on purpose, because, like, I mean, I agree. I wouldn't want to read something about regular life. That's boring.
I get bored,
But it is to say that to make sure that as you're reading these things, you can separate reality from this fictional reality. Because at the end of the day, this is all still fiction.
Yeah, and I think that becomes tricky, especially, like, in other avenues of, like, a relationship, and I think especially, like, not only, like, the expectation of, like, relationships and guys, but, like, just sex life, too.
Oh, yeah.
Like,
oh, yeah.
that, like, Colleen Hoover has some spicy moments,
Love
and
it.
it's great. Love reading it. But I think it sets this weird, like, precedent for how sex is in a relationship. Like, you're not always going to have, like, this really high, passionate, like, animalistic
oh, yeah.
sex with your partner. Like,
which
and
it
all
shows...
of those, like, all of the scenes in her books are, like, just pure passion, like, crazy.
Lust.
Like, yeah. And it's just like, that's not how it is.
Right. And then I think, again, goes back to, like, well, why isn't my sex life like that?
Yeah.
Or am I doing it wrong? Or is my partner not performing well enough? Which isn't necessarily the case, and that's not true. And sure, like, it's about having those open conversations if you do feel like you need a little bit more. But I don't think you can, you know, get thrown against a wall all the time. Or, like, super long, like, sessions of just, like, intense stuff. Like, that doesn't always work out that way, and it shouldn't have to.
Oh, for sure. Like, and it ends with us, like, one of the scenes is, like, in her workplace. And I'm like,
oh, what?
I'm like, I would, first off, I think just, like, die.
Die.
If, like, some guy was like, let's go back to your office and just, like, do it real fast. I'm like, no, that's just unrealistic.
Yeah, that's also
like,
weird.
Oh, that's not appropriate.
That's not appropriate.
Not even weird, but I'm just like, you know, like, I don't know. I'm just...
Right.
Can
Locations are different.
Right.
Like, the whole scenarios are different. And, like, I kind of brought this up before, but, like, I said that I don't read a lot of this kind of romance novels, but I read a lot of, like, fantasy romance novels, which this ties into the smut for sure, because those are also super great and intense.
Yeah.
But they're also super unrealistic because the men have wings, or they're vampires that like bite you, and it's intense as the orgasm, and it's just like that does not happen in real life. But it does set this like, wow, like I wish I could do that, or like right, and it's
and I think sometimes too, it's like at the end of the day we're tired.
Right.
Like, and that's not always, like, a priority.
Right. And sometimes, like, in real life, you gotta schedule it in.
Exactly.
Or you don't, like, you come home from work, you cook, you sleep. I really don't know where the people have the time to be doing...
time squeezing in grocery shopping.
Yeah, exactly.
Let alone, like, any, like, craziness, like, that's going on.
And it goes to show, like, the books don't really, like, somehow time, I think, in books is completely different.
Oh,
like,
for sure. It's like you have endless hours to your day.
Endless hours.
And I'm like, oh... I wish. Like, it'd be so nice.
Or they just, like, breeze by, like, oh, I worked, came home at, like, 2 p.m. It's like, wow, it must be nice.
Right. Or it's always, this is also a theme I've noticed with some of hers. It's, like, Anne Verity, like, the main character, she is an author, so she makes her own schedule, and it ends with us. She owns her own floral shop.
Oh, wow, they're all,
so they're all, like, you know, not work from home, but, like, make your own schedule, like, work for themselves.
Which is a pretty low population rate, I think, in real life. Most of us work for someone.
Like, you and I, like, we get home maybe at the earliest, like, 6:30. Yeah. And by that point, it's like, I'm tired. Like,
I cook dinner and I sleep.
I want to watch some TV.
Yep,
like,
watch some TV.
So, like, I think it would be a lot different.
Unwind.
Yeah, if I got home at, like, 2 o'clock or was able to make my own schedule, like, that'd be totally different. But... that's just not reality.
Right, and I feel like there's other things, like you mentioned the Colleen Hoover unrealistic, like with family members and stuff.
Yes.
So, like, the way she deals with kids.
Yeah.
You can talk about that, because, again, I haven't read it.
Yeah, so I know in, like, Verity, and I don't want to give any spoilers for you, but so...
I'm going to read Verity.
Yes, so
that's
good.
the one
My
I'm
favorite
read.
book of hers. But the main guy, I'm trying to think how I can phrase it without spoiling it. The husband has a son, and, you know, it's like the main woman and then Verity's husband. They end up falling in love, and I'm not spoiling anything. You can read that off the back of the book, basically.
Yeah, I did know that already.
And, yeah, okay, perfect. And so, Verity and her husband, they have a son together. But, like, I'm reading the book, and he's, like, 4 or 5 years old. And I'm like, where is he?
Where's your son?
During, like, this entire, like, endeavor that's going on, it's like Verity's in, like, basically, like, she's not in a coma, but she's essentially brain dead.
Oh, okay.
And so she clearly can't watch their son. And I'm like, okay, Dad, like, you're off, like, spending all this time with, like...
The new girl.
But, like, where's your kid? Like,
where's the kid?
Right, like, if they have a nanny, that's cool, but, like, it's never mentioned, so it's like, it's almost like the kid's added in for...
Effect.
Yeah, to make the guy, like, oh my gosh, he's super dad. And because he's almost like a single dad because his wife can't do anything, but it's like... Okay.
Ooh, wait, so is that, do you consider that cheating? I feel like this is a big, like... Because I didn't know she was brain dead. I thought she died.
No.
Oh, so she's alive.
She's alive.
Oh, that's interesting.
But just, yeah, she can't do anything.
Huh. That's a moral question.
Yeah. And that's not the only...
moral question?
Time that, that's come up, especially in Verity. There's a lot of moral questions.
Okay.
And same thing kind of, like, with reminders of him. Same thing, like, main character, their daughter is in foster care because they lost custody, and meets this guy, and it's like, I'm still reading the book, I haven't finished it yet, so maybe I'm wrong, but again, it's like...
But so far, there's a daughter involved, and she doesn't care about the daughter.
Right, it's just like, okay, like, again, like, we've lost, like, this plot line with this kid, and same thing with, it ends with us, like,
Are there always kids?
There's kids in a lot of her books. Like, oh goodness, okay. So, it ends with us. There's two guys, kind of like a love triangle situation. One guy she met in high school and fell in love with him, but then he was shipped off to the military, didn't have contact with him. The other guy she met when she's, like, in her 20s. He's, like, this med student, super hot, like... falls in love first sight, and they end up having...
Obviously, there we go again.
Right, of course. Like, they end up having a kid, but then their relationship becomes really abusive, really toxic, and then it's like, okay, but how do you fit in a kid with all of that?
Right.
While she's also, like, still, like, rekindling the relationship with, like, the old, like, high school guy, and I'm like, that's a really complicated situation. Like, how are you fitting in, like... like a baby, and also...
Oh, go ahead.
No, but like a divorce and a new relationship and working as well.
Yeah, I don't know where any of that is going on in real life. And I'm sure people have similar situations in their lives, but I'm also sure, like, in those moments, they're not having the steamy smut sex, and they're not... Right. There may not be a love triangle going on, and there's those other things that are adding to it. But also, I wonder if that, like, kind of... I don't know how she writes this, so I could be wrong. But, like, romanticizes, like, abusive relationships, or, like, the fact that this their hot doctor, now they're making him abusive.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh.
And I've also noticed, too, it's always, like, the guys don't want the relationship at first, but then, like, she's like, oh, I'll change that. Yeah. And then it's like, then he becomes abusive, and, like... That's a big thing.
That could be a life lesson. Because do not try to change anybody.
If they say they don't want a relationship,
they don't want a relationship. Yeah. It is, like, you cannot change someone.
No.
And, but that's the big thing with, like, going back to Twilight, the whole Edward and Bella thing. Like, Edward was this, like, standoffish, like, bad boy character. Obviously a vampire, but
we can look
off of that, but it's more of like, oh, I can be the one who gets his attention or changes him. Now, she didn't really think that necessarily, but just the same idea of the bad boy changing the bad boy, or at least trying to. And then sometimes it succeeds.
Yeah.
Which...
That's rare. So don't...
Rare in real life, but in books that's a huge trope. Like,
and I also think, too, this, kind of going off Twilight, it's like sometimes a girl changes herself entirely. She literally became a vampire to be with Edward. And it's kind of like the same thing with, like, Colleen Hoover books. It's like these girls are kind of giving up some of, like, their own personal values and morals.
Apparently they're giving up a daughter.
Right, like... And... it's like, especially in It Ends With Us, like, her mom, her parents got a divorce, or, like, left each other because her dad was really abusive to her mom, and so she was always like, I will never be with a guy who lays a hand on me, like...
Foreshadowing.
Yeah. And then, hot neurosurgeon, like, he hits her a couple times, and she's like, it's okay. Oh. And it takes, like, until she has, like, she gets pregnant, where she's like, all right, like this is pretty
okay.
serious, which like it's good to have that realization, but it's also like, you know, is he really worth like letting him hit you?
No.
Like, no. Well, like, I don't care how much money he makes or how hot he is. Like,
right.
Him hitting you is just,
right.
That does not make it okay.
But I also feel like it gives, like, those books, so there's a very, like, easy reason to be like, no, you shouldn't be with the doctor because he hits you. Totally fair.
For sure.
But in real life, there's, like, love triangles where there is no right, or like you're so confused and it's stressful, and I feel like they glorify the whole love triangle thing in books. That's another trope that they kind of throw out there, and it's like, oh, it'd be fun, like Edward and Jacob and Bella, and then this book, and so many other books are always like the whole love quadruple, and it's like, honestly, that'd be so stressful. And I wouldn't want to deal with that at all.
Looking at it on paper, it's like, of course, like I want you guys to be like fighting over me, like anybody
who wouldn't,
right? Like it's exciting, but then like reality of it, it's like you clearly care about both of these people, and at the end of the day, someone's gonna get hurt, or everyone's gonna get hurt.
Most likely everyone.
Most likely everyone. I mean, just going off of like Twilight again, like Jacob was hurt many times. Bella was hurt many. She lost her best friend. Like
they all got hurt.
Like same thing with Colleen Hoover books. It's like ends in divorce, or ends in like ends in or friendships that have ended, or same thing kind of with Verity. There's like a little bit of like a love triangle going back to like the morals of it too.
Well, technically he's still married.
So like clearly he still loves his wife, but now he loves this new girl, and it's like,
dang, that's rough.
Yeah.
That's a tough. That'd be a hard one. That's like a moral difficult.
It is,
situation.
And that's why I love Verity, because there's so much like, it's almost like a psychological thriller, because you're like questioning every little thing, and I can't say too much.
Yeah, don't say too
So
much.
I can't spoil it, but it almost like makes me question my morals sometimes, and I'm like, like I can understand like why you did this,
right?
Like,
or your thought process, but like, would you do the same? I don't know.
Right. I think that's a really good question to like pose.
For sure.
Like,
even though I don't know what the question is.
Oh, I wish I could tell you, because there's
don't tell
so
me,
much.
I am gonna read it. Maybe we'll do like a part 2 to this or something.
Ooh,
when I
that'd
actually
be fun.
read Verity.
It's so good. It really is. But I think that also kind of goes back, like kind of like with those like tropes that we going back to like the love triangle. It's always like the guy best friend who we always thought was like not attractive,
ugly,
and now like suddenly they have like this new like big change, and you're like,
they always have to get attractive, and that's one of the things that's like, that's not realistic.
No, like no, like there might be some guys out there who do go through like this big transformation.
That does happen.
It does happen.
Too.
Absolutely,
right.
Yeah. But I think, being like, I'm gonna wait for you to do that.
Right, and I think it really sets up this like, you can't be the main character or in a relationship unless you're attractive, or like, you know what I mean, like it. For people who are just average or not like these super hot. And a lot of books, like, I don't know how Colleen Hoover does, but with the books that I have read, there are some where they do mention, like, the girl isn't a twig, right? Yeah. She has thickness to her, which is nice. It adds a little bit more, like, she's normal, but still gets the really hot guy, which then, that's unrealistic.
Yeah. It is.
And you're like, well, if she could in the book, why can't I in real life?
And I think then it also has such a big impact on, like, our self-esteem.
Huge.
Like,
at least for girls.
For sure. Oh, for sure.
Probably guys, too. I'm gonna let y'all, maybe you care. Maybe if your woman really wants you to have strong muscles and wings, you
can figure out a way to
feel
do that.
Inferior.
Right.
But
like, there was one book that I can't remember the title of it, but it was, again, like, very similar to Colleen Hoover style. It was more like this plus-size woman. She is a journalist, and she signs up for like this personal training app, and it's supposed to be totally anonymous. And then like she ends up meeting her personal trainer, and he is like this, like, of course, like model status, like washboard abs, like just textbook, like very attractive guy. And she's what you would say like the conventionally like unattractive, because she is like plus size. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
And I think, that can be hard. Like, I love reading it because I think it set, like, such a good example. But I think that does make it that much harder, like, when we are reading that. If we are struggling with, like, self-esteem of, like, okay, like, well, she can do it. Like, why can't I? Like, what am I doing wrong?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like, what am I doing wrong? What do I have to do differently? Or, like, how do I have to change myself? Going back to that. Yep, exactly.
And I think that's so dangerous of realizing, like, we're not the problem. Like, the right person will come along, but it's that thought process that spirals.
It gets in your head.
Yeah.
Yep.
Like, or, I also think, too, a little bit they kind of glorify, like, trauma, especially in girls.
Oh, yeah.
Like, and it ends with us, like, she has a background of, like, domestic violence at home, and they almost, like, romanticize it and make it not okay, but it doesn't do an accurate description of, like, what people actually experience.
When that actually is happening. Like, when I was in my internship in undergrad, I kind of did some stuff for the Salvation Army Women's Shelter for domestic abuse and violence.
Yeah.
They're not out there parading, like, they are lost their jobs because they were financially abused, like, literally have to live in a shelter with their kids, and it's a very poor circumstance. Like, it's not necessarily the way that it is explained in books, and, like, sure, there are probably circumstances out there in real life where that could be the case, but there's a lot of cases where, like, the abuse is not from a wealthy man. Like, it is from you are not well off, and it's hard to get out of it, and you're stuck.
That's the thing, and it's like and it ends with us. He does kind of come to the realization of, like, oh my gosh, like, I messed up so much. Like, I totally did this. I'm the one who ruined our relationship. But that also doesn't happen.
Right.
A lot. Like, if ever. Like, they
don't care.
No, they don't care. And, he steps up and becomes, like, super dad, and he, like, pays for, like, her a new apartment and, like, everything for the baby.
Whoa, must be nice.
Right. And it's like, okay, again, unrealistic. And then she, again, already has, like, a new guy.
Right.
And it's like, okay, it's not that easy.
No.
It is never that easy.
Right, because now she has two good guys.
Right. It ends with,
essentially.
Like, and I think that's where It Starts With Us comes in, is, like, the ex-husband comes in and fights for her again, and I'm like, that's not.
He shouldn't even be, like, an idea.
Right.
Like, he shouldn't even be in there.
Yeah, exactly. And so, again, like, it's great that he had the realization that, like, what he did was wrong, but now we're going back and being like, oh, well, I could take you back.
Right.
And I'm like, no.
And it goes into, like, I was actually having this conversation when I was on vacation with a couple of girls, like, randomly at a pool, and we were talking about how we all read the same kind of books, and the trauma trope in books that gain characterization or plot points, basically. Like, all of these things that happen, and it's, like, for plot, or it's, like, but it's all trauma related, and, like, to be fair, that is a true fact, and I was like, yeah, I mean, like, all authors kind of do that. Like, they all add trauma as a way to develop characters. Because you just can't develop without trauma, apparently.
No, like, you cannot just have personal growth without someone dying. Or
without a huge, crazy death, bad thing, like, any kind of traumatic experience. Like, that has to be the thing that changes someone. Right. It can't just be normal growth.
Normal just development. And I also think, too, like, there's that trauma piece, and then especially in Colleen Hoover books, like, any job that they have, especially since they are self-employed, they end up doing, like, phenomenally well. And I'm like,
so they're not, like, crazy busy, don't even have a life. I feel like most store owners that I know are, like, people
busting
their butts. Yes.
Yeah.
Like, it is hard work. Their life is that, because that's their life. Like, that's how they live, and they put all of their time and energy into that. They're not having crazy romances.
No.
Like, they don't got time for this.
And that's the thing, and, like, It Ends With Us, like, she opens her own floral shop, and they do hit on, like, the process of that and, like, how much work she put into it. But again, there's also that, like, unrealistic piece of it of, like, she had neurosurgeon's, like, sister, like, working for who's also a millionaire and is only doing it because she wants a hobby. And I'm like,
oh, must be nice.
Right, so she already has an employee that she doesn't have to pay. And then over time, she becomes, like, within, like, a year, she becomes, like, voted best, like, new business of, I can't remember where, like, what city it's set in. And, like, then she's able to, like, stay home most days with their baby. And I'm like, that is not the case for most new businesses, like, shop owners. It's like, you're in there day in, day out, like, doing the dirty work.
Right.
And I think that's...
Again, sets up an unrealistic precedent of, like, oh, maybe I want to be a shop owner, and then, like, you realize it is not that.
Right, yeah.
Or, like, you know, other shop owners who are reading it will be like, well, it must be nice, because that's not how
I do it.
Life is working out for me.
And I think, too, like, I'm, like, going off, like, different little thought bubbles, but I think, too, like, with, like, single parents, they
oh my gosh, yeah.
glorify it a little bit, and they make it seem so much easier than it actually is.
Not, yeah.
No. Like, not to keep going back to, like, It Ends With Us, but she was a single mom for a little bit, and I'm like, she makes it seem like a breeze.
Right.
Same thing with Verity. I'm like, yeah, it must be a breeze because you never mentioned your kid.
Right.
Like,
right.
because my mom was a single mom, and I know, like...
what it was like.
Yeah, and I'm like, that is not at all how that was.
Mm-mm.
Like, we were, you know, struggling a lot, and I'm like, it is not... You don't just get to, like, I'll leave work and, like, let me go get my baby and we'll go, like, go shopping and, like, yeah, no. Like,
right.
Most single moms are working, like,
a lot,
like, multiple jobs and, like, still somehow, like, making dinner, getting kids to school, and they don't have a whole, like, crew behind them most of the time.
Right, and that's honestly, to me, more powerful in the real life where those women are able to do those kind of things, and I think books kind of make it less powerful in a way. Like, it makes it seem like if you read that and then you run into, like, a single parent, you're like, oh, it must be so easy because my idea of a single mom is your kid's never around.
Right, like, you can just kind of drop them off, like, whenever.
Right.
Or, especially, too, it's like someone has to swoop in and, like, save you guys. And
the big, like, I need a guy to save me.
Yeah.
Or to make all my problems go away. Which, to be fair, a dual income is definitely helpful.
Oh, for sure. Oh, yeah.
But it, like, goes into that, like, I think the same should be for, like, men. I also think it's, like, because women tend to, not always, have the kids if they're a single parent. Sure. Most of the time it's the mom, sometimes it's the dad. And having to care for yourself plus others takes much more than just one income, especially if you're not making all that good money.
Especially if you're living in a big city, too. Because most of her books are set in, like, bigger cities.
Okay. And I feel like most books are.
Yeah, most romance novels are. And I'm like...
Nicholas Sparks had some small towns.
He has some small towns.
Yeah.
Like, but when you're... I think it was, like, Boston or something like that. I'm like, rent's not cheap out there.
No.
Like, no. I could never. And, like, it's just
plus
like...
kids, that's crazy.
Yeah.
So I think it definitely, like, those books make an unrealistic expectation or even, like, portrayal of what that is like for single parents.
Yeah. And it's just... That's just something that kind of, like, grinds my gears a little bit. As much as I love her books, and I wouldn't stop reading them, but...
You have that, like, personal...
Experience.
Yeah. Right.
It just makes me, like, I think Verity took me a little bit longer to read, because it is, like... It's an intense book, just as, like, a little forewarning.
I only read intense books.
But, no, perfect, so you're gonna love it. But it was also just, like... hard to digest with some, like, especially talking about kids, and I'm like, that is just not how it is, like, at all. And it's, but that's said with all
of these, books. And it's like, I mean, the whole, I think, theme here is, like, overall, it's not very realistic, and it doesn't portray things the way reality would.
Absolutely.
However, who wants to read about reality?
No one does.
You'd be reading nonfiction.
Like,
right.
That's a self-help book at that point.
That's a self-help book, right. Like, now you're reading nonfiction, or, like, someone, like, which, again, we know that we're going into this saying that it's fiction, but I still think that even knowing it's fiction, it gets in your head.
Absolutely.
And it can either it's hard for you to read because it brings back some things of personal experience, or there's a lot going on, and like, and for like me personally, sometimes like the smut really gets into your head, and it's like, whoa, like this is not realistic, but like, what if it was?
Like,
and I'm like, don't think like that, because you can't put that expectation on yourself even. Like, you're not doing any of that shit either.
It's like, I have to like schedule time to even just read this book.
Right.
Like, let alone like,
exactly.
have this crazy love life.
Exactly. The time of my love life is being taken up by me reading about
Right. Like, I'm reading about this fictional love life, not even living my own.
Exactly. And yeah, I definitely feel like they're like super specific sometimes with things like that, and it, again, if it just isn't what you're having in real life, it can get into your mind.
Absolutely. And I think too with like, and I know I'm not the only one who can like mass read a book and like have it done in a day.
Oh, there's so many people.
But I think that can also be dangerous too, of just like you're taking it in so quickly, and then you can't even like really process it, but you're just like, oh, like I need this now. Like it's almost like addicting, because you get such a big like dopamine rush when you're reading it, and then when you go back to reality, it's like, oh, this sucks.
This sucks.
Like, I hate this.
I found myself, because I can binge read books like that too. It just, my work schedule doesn't allow that. So it's like weekend binging. But then when I'm at work, I'm thinking about the book, and I'm excited to read it again, and it's like, not all the time when I'm at work, but like, there's moments where it's like, I wake up, I'm like, oh, I can't wait to read the book again. And like, I'm just living my life for that escape at that point, and I really have to like take a step back and be like, no, like, you gotta live in the present of what like your actual life, what's actually going on. And then like your book could be like a side thing.
A little like, a treat at the end of the day or something. Like, I know like I'm getting a little too far into the deep end when I'm like, I'm gonna go to the bathroom, but I'm taking my book with me.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, like, girl, like, pump the brakes. Like, I don't need to, like, be washing my hands and trying to flip through the pages. It's like,
I've gotten to those points.
Oh, yeah. And I'm like, what is wrong with me?
Because the book's so interesting, or it's just like, and I've, a specific series, Zodiac Academy. It's basically like an adult Harry Potter.
Love that.
Very smutty, it's a bully romance.
Okay.
So also on that end, terrible. Do not fall in love with someone who is bullying you or tries to kill you. Like, that is...
Like, there's so many books that could be...
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
But like, I was reading that series, and I think I sped read through 1 through 6 in like... And these are thick boys. They're like 600, 500 page books.
Very different than Colleen Hoover books.
Yeah. I read like really long books, and... I just remember just being, like, immersed in it and feeling exhausted afterwards. Because it's, like, a frustrating read sometimes, and, like, the characters annoy you. But, like, also you're, like, just been in this alternate universe for so long, and you're, like, coming back to reality, and I, like, burnt myself out. I was like, oh, man, like, woo, this was a crazy wild ride.
Yeah, like... I know, I feel so tired when I finish one of her books, because it is such, like, a big, like, emotional ride, and I'm like... Ooh, I need a minute to just, like, take a minute, like, just process what I just read.
But that was, it's actually interesting, I should have brought this up earlier when we were talking about it, but I was remembering with Zodiac Academy, it's a bully romance, so the whole idea of it is that the main characters, one of the main characters falls in love with the person who bullies her. Yeah. Like... to the point of, like, almost killing her.
Oh, my God.
Like, so, now, of course, it goes back to Family Feud, so it's, like, the kind of, like, a Romeo and Juliet-ish. Very, very different, but, like, has that whole, like, well, my family is supposed to hate your family kind of thing, and because
star-crossed lovers, like...
Star-crossed, it literally is. Yeah. And because there's a magical aspect, as I said, it's like Harry Potter, there is magic involved, so, like, they can control elements, and, like, so the bullying is even, like, worse than even most bullying, and then they like fall in love with each other, and like they were fated to be together, and it's like a whole sorry, spoiler if that.
No, that's okay. It's okay.
Go back. But don't listen. But I mean, it's obvious, to be honest, but don't fall in love with the man who tries to kill you, please. That's really bad. But in this book, it romanticizes it. A very different take. So
it almost goes back too to like what we're taught in like elementary school. Of, like if a boy's mean to you, he likes you.
He likes you.
No, sometimes they're just mean.
Yeah, and also that shouldn't be the way he tells you that he likes you. It should be nice.
Yeah, and it sets up like those like dangerous like expectations.
Expectations
of like, oh, I'm gonna go after the bad boy.
Right.
Okay, sometimes it works out, but sometimes, like, be careful.
Right. I think it only really works out in movies and TV shows and books, to be honest. I don't think it really works out too much in real life.
No. Like, because if someone who loves you, they would not bully you.
Yeah.
Like, end of story, like, so just don't love someone who tries to kill you. It's not worth it.
Yeah, that's not it.
No, not at all.
But again, I mean, like, it's an escape, and, like, you know that, but it's also, like, if you think about it realistically, it's like, ooh, why are we doing that?
Right, like, we know, like, that's
right. We know that that's not a thing, and it's fine to be in the fiction. Like, I love that series. I binged it, so, like, love it. However, don't take that and run with it. Like, not in real life.
No, not at all. Even, like, with Harry Potter, like, those were books I read, oh my gosh, like, probably 15 years ago.
Oh, wow.
But almost, like, with Hermione and Draco, like, he was a jerk. And then,
were they a thing in the books? Or did she like them in the books?
Who am I thinking of? Hermione and
Ron.
Don't listen to me. Didn't Hermione like Draco because he was kind of a jerk?
I never read the books.
Okay.
I watched the movies, and that was not in the movies. However, in real life, I think they had a crush on each other, which is so cute.
That is really cute. I could have been totally wrong with that. It has been a minute since I've read Harry Potter.
Discard that.
Probably
not true.
Probably not true.
But anyway, like, the Zodiac Academy is true, and there's other bully romance books out there for sure.
Oh.
And it's definitely a trope that people like to have, because that is truly changing the bad boy. I mean, think about Vampire Diaries, Elena and Damon.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
I'm pro Elena and Damon. I wanted them together the entire time. Why? I don't know. That's stupid.
Yeah, or it also goes back to, like, this broken aspect of, like, people, like, and it ends with us, like, military guy, he was homeless before. And, like, she kind of, like, snuck him into, like, her parents' house. And it's like, that is really sweet that you're doing that, but that's also incredibly dangerous.
Yeah, what if he was a murderer?
Right. You don't know what could happen when you're sneaking in.
Did she know him previous to that?
No.
Oh, so she literally found a homeless man on the street.
Yes.
And decided, oh, you look kind of cute. Come into my house.
Yeah.
That's horrible.
But, like, we need to stop putting ourselves in these dangerous positions. Like, same thing with, like...
Wait, so she didn't know him in high school at all?
They, I think, sat next to each other on the school bus.
So she did know him.
She kind of knew him.
But still, you could be neighbors with a murderer. You don't know.
You have no idea. Like, they weren't, like, friends until she realized, like, he was homeless. And then she was like, oh, you can sleep, like, in my bedroom.
What?
Yeah!
Whose mom is allowing her to do this?
Like, I'm like, no, ma'am. Like, if I ever found, like, my future daughter to be, like, have, like, a little homeless boy sleeping, I'd be like,
excuse me,
like, what's going on? Like, I'm so glad that you are trying to be a kind human. But let's go back to safety.
But safety, right? Like, we don't know who this is.
Right.
And unfortunately, you have to play the safety game, because there's a lot of people out there who will rob, steal. I'm surprised you didn't do that in the books.
Right. Even with, like, Pretty Little Liars, like, she falls in love with her high school teacher.
Oh my gosh, yes.
I'm like,
crazy. Crazy.
Like, we should not be doing that.
No. But it sets up that precedent of, like, there's another show about that too, but the flipped version. Oh my gosh.
Oh.
Why can't I think of it? It's the teacher. She's the teacher and he's the kid.
I do know
what you're talking about. She's the teacher and he's the kid.
I do know what you're talking about, though. I can't think of what it's called, but I know exactly what you're talking about.
Oh, this is gonna bother me. Anyway, the same idea.
Same thing.
About their, like, a love relationship.
It's like, we know it shouldn't be, but, like, we're gonna make it through because we're special.
And that's like...
No.
Also, I think people forget how young high schoolers truly are. Like, and I can't remember if that TV show is... I think The Teacher. It's called The Teacher, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. Because it's on, like, Hulu or something like that.
Hulu or HBO.
Yeah, one of the two. Yeah.
One of the H's.
Yeah.
But I think it's called The Teacher. Something like that.
I think you're right, yeah.
I can't remember, like... the difference of how old you are in high school. You are a baby.
I work primarily with, like, middle school to high school age kids. And I'm like, y'all are children. Like,
babies.
Like,
even 16-year-olds, you're babies.
Yeah.
17-year-olds, you are a baby.
And I'm
like, you don't know it, but you are.
Yes.
And then when you get to be 20s, you're like, oh crap, I was a baby.
Like,
yeah.
It's like that manipulation piece of, like, like, those books and TV shows, like, glorify, like, that older person, like, coming up to, like, the younger person. It's
like 100% manipulation and pedophilia and
yeah,
all the
but
things
it's
that
like,
it shouldn't
we can be like, oh, but it's okay because they love each other. And it's like,
no.
That is not how that
because
works.
the love from the teen is almost always manipulated, and it's not real.
And a lot of times too, it's like their first like real relationship,
right?
Where they
don't understand, and they use the predators will use that against you, and like that's just a no. That's a no.
It's very sticky.
It's very sticky. But yeah, so overall, does the shoe fit? No. But
not at all.
It is okay that it doesn't, because we all want to get out of
right. We all want to escape from
reality anyway.
Yeah.
But remember, be careful, because it shouldn't be real life.
Right.
And that's why we're reading it, to escape real life, so it's not going to be real life.
Yeah.
So don't expect that in real life.
Absolutely. I think just a little like lesson maybe to take away from all of this is like, remember why you're in a relationship with somebody. Like yes, like I love Colleen Hoover books, like I will always keep reading those, but like you said, it's not reality. Take a minute, like maybe after you finish one of those books, to be like, okay, if you are in a relationship, why do I love this person? Why am I with them?
Right. And if you're not, maybe think like, what are actual expectations that I want to have in a relationship, and like maybe not base it off of what you just read.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that's great.
Well, so thank you for listening, everybody, and hopefully we'll do this maybe again if people request another book one. I could talk about books forever, like my fantasy
Verity,
people
we can do a little follow-up.
We could do a follow-up Verity session, and then all my fantasy book lovers out there, I could totally talk about that for years, so let us know if you're interested.
Yeah, awesome.
All right, well then, thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.